Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Educators, Performers, Creators Show. My name is Paulino Brenner. This is the EPC show, edition number 10. And as usual, I try to bring in different performers, educators, and creators to learn more about them and learn more about ourselves. We are live on Sunday, January 11th, 11 Central, but you might be watching this as a recording. Anyway, if you're watching live or recording, you can post your questions on the YouTube video. If you're live, we might be able to answer them right now with you, which would be exciting. If not, I'll get your questions to my guest today later, and I'm sure she will be delighted to get back to you. I have a special guest today, Marie Olofsdotter. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing today?
Good. Happy Sunday to you.
Thank
And
you.
everyone else out there.
I haven't been out yet. We are both in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but we are cozy inside our homes because we are in the frozen land here. But talking about the frozen land, Marie, we're going to start with your origin and beginnings. So I understand I've been doing some homework, watching some interviews you have done, and I know you're from Sweden.
Yes.
And you studied visual arts, but came to United States for something different.
Yeah.
Clowning school. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah. So I started out as a visual artist, although I will say that I've always been an interdisciplinary artist, meaning I've always liked to draw. I've also liked physical theater and writing poetry and stories as well. But I made my focus on visual art and poetry in particular. But after a few years in art school, I studied art history too first, and then went into art school, went for 3 years, and decided I wanted to take 1 year off to study physical theater and clowning. So I did that in Stockholm, and my teacher was from Duluth of all places, which of course at that time no one had ever heard of, where I was anyway. But he had studied in California, Blue Lake, and so I decided to go to that school for 2 years of clowning, and then go back to my fine art school in sculpture, which didn't happen because I ended up in Minnesota.
Perfect. So I learned a few things from your interviews with Nadia, Jordana, and Catherine Reed Day. So I'm going to make reference to some of those, and I will also post them in the description of this video so people can go back and see those wonderful interviews. But one thing I learned is that you were invited to perform in Bemidji and Bemidji area, and that's how you ended up in Minneapolis. But
Yeah,
my question to you is, why did you stay in Minneapolis? Because a lot of people come here.
yeah, a lot of people come here. I ended up in northern Minnesota doing Commedia dell'arte theater all over Minnesota. And it was really interesting. The person who had invited me from my clown school, my teacher, he had his brother and sister pick us up at the airport. And the first thing they said to us was, me and 3 other performers, that Minneapolis is the greatest place to live. And we've lived all over, and we've decided that this is great. So I guess immediately had a positive feeling. They said there's lots of arts going on here, you know, lots of grassroots activities, just a beautiful city. So I have that planted. So after my summer of doing Commedia dell'arte, I wasn't done with the U.S. quite. So I went to Minneapolis during a thunderstorm. I don't know if I mentioned that in my other interviews. With
Yes, you did, with $400.
with $400 to my name, and it was quite dramatic. And then I stayed and stayed. But I think as anyone who leaves their country, for me anyway, every year I wonder, is this the year when I go home? I still do. I still do think about it. But it's never, that year hasn't come yet.
How long have you been here?
Since 82, 81, and then 82 in this area.
Right. Right. So going back to your clowning experience, I know you, in your interviews, you talk about where you were going into sculpture, which is kind of an isolated activity. You're on your own in your studio, and you were not ready for that kind of work. So you wanted to explore more, being expressive and um, connecting with the world like the clowns do with their audience. How has the clowning experience affected your life or influenced your art or your teaching?
Yeah, first I was going to mention that the theatrical clowning and the clown, the harlequin, was with me actually even as I sculpted. And the last body of work I created before I left my school were sculptural masks. And so even visually I was interested in that, in the idea of a mask and what that represents. So, and also I was a very shy person. In my teens, basically, I wouldn't speak if there was more than one person in the room besides myself. So I wanted to break through that barrier. Plus, in spite of being shy, even in grade school, we used to have funny hour, roliga timmen in Sweden, and I had a best friend, and her and I did stand-up comedy. so, So stand-up comedy and drawing and then, writing were my things. But I wanted to explore that more. And from my little hometown of Finspång, we had a group that were into doing theatrical clowning. So there, I wasn't the only one from that little town. There was one other person from that town in that clown school the year I went. And I like to say that everything I ever needed to know, I learned in clown school. You know that saying, I learned in first grade or kindergarten, whatever that is.
Kindergarten, yes.
Yeah, and I feel that it was elemental because you learn, first of all, to improvise. And one of the ideas with improvisation is you make everyone else look good, right? So it's the community aspect of it, which is fabulous. And then just making things up on your feet. And also being able to command an audience, which is really good in my work as a teaching artist, because that has a theatrical element to it. When you come into a classroom, you have to engage sometimes up to 30, 33 students, just like that. So
right.
it's, and what I liked about it too, it had a lot of body work in it, which I have always liked. Even yoga way back when, and this would have been 1980. I mean, of course, yoga has been around for a very long time, but not as popular as it is now.
Right. So, I would like to go back more to your connection to Minnesota and the community, and also about your family a little later. But I would like to hear a little more about your body of work and some of your themes. I'd like to share here a picture of a lovely lady with some birds on her hair or around her hair, and I see many features here that I recognize in other uh, works that I've seen. What can you tell us about this image?
This image started out being called Blue Wind. Just wanted to, this has to do with lines and shapes. I just wanted to do the hair blowing in the wind, basically, and then the birds were an afterthought. But it is true that that's a recurring image with the birds and the female image.
Okay.
I don't know if it can show digitally, but there's quite a bit of texture in there too. And that's where my sculptural background comes in. I work my surfaces quite a bit before I paint. I sand them, I gesso them. I'm really at it.
Right. Well,
I don't do that, but yeah.
One of my goals here at Educators Performance Creators is uh, get into that work a little more. And in one of your interviews before, you mentioned it takes you a long time to get into your work. In fact, we have a question from Teresa that I'd like to share with you. And Teresa has a couple of questions, but one is like right what I was going to ask you. You said in a previous interview that it takes a long time to get into your work. Can you elaborate on that a little more? And then she has a question about Photoshop. She says, what is your learning curve with Photoshop? Any suggestions to artists struggling with it? Which is a great question for artists who are starting with a new tool. So let's start with, how long does it take you to get into your work, or what does that mean?
If it means, I'll give a literal example. Next week, or for the next 2 weeks, I'm going to work at home with the exception of a few meetings. It might take me at least a day that I procrastinate, always circle my work to get into. I think it has to do with getting into a really quiet mode that I can actually sit still, because I like to move a lot. I like to sit in the couch, stand up, go out, move. And so that is what getting into it. More than thematically, I think it has to do with finding that quieter place inside to sit down.
Great.
If that
And
answers it, I think it might.
yes, yes. And also she asked, what is your learning curve with Photoshop? You mentioned that that's a tool that you recently started to use.
The learning curve. Now, with that, I was very fortunate to get a Minnesota State Arts Board grant to learn to use Photoshop, and it included working with a coach. So I had a digital coach. And in the beginning, I realized Photoshop is a language, it's a science. And once I grasped that, then things started moving for me. And then I'm still finding my voice, just like with any new medium. But I think my paintings mixed with photographs and images I might find online and coloration, digital coloration, will be my ultimate medium, collage.
Perfect.
So, coloration and things like that, and collaging.
So the things that you're mentioning sound familiar with your description of the work that you've done recently for the Minnesota State Art Fair, for the Minnesota State Fair, which includes art. So you have been selected this past year for the main poster and other materials, and we can see a lot of about that with your interview with Nadia Jordana, and also with the interview with Catherine Reed Day. So I would like you to tell us a little bit about the process of selection briefly, because I have a few follow-up questions on that. So here I'm sharing with people the poster for the Minnesota State Fair for 2014.
13. That's what I want.
Sorry, 2013. So how do you get selected to do this?
I was just going to go back to the previous question of Teresa, that I highly recommend getting a private tutor if possible. So I'm just going to end with that. So then you can design your own learning curve with them. So now that used to be a commission, that an artist would be commissioned to do it. And then 1 year, 3 years before mine, it was announced as a competition, and you got to apply to do it, and I did and didn't get it. Next year was announced again, I applied, didn't get it. The next year announced again, I applied, and boom, I won the commission, and one of the most wonderful experiences of my artistic life. Was just delightful. Now, since then though, it's not been announced as a competition. The last two have been commissioned to do the piece. So it was a 3-year window where it was announced, and you could apply to do it. That's how
So that's interesting that they commissioned for a while, and then it was more of a competition, and now back to commission. How do you feel about artists in competition? Can we artists be part of the competitiveness of our society nowadays? How do we compete with art?
Well, I think that aspect of our work is there whether we like it or not. It's there, and maybe it can drive us. Sometimes it can depress you. And my hope is that for your particular brand, there is an audience. it might not be a huge national audience, it might be a marginal audience, but that is just something that I have to believe, that my particular brand and the thing that I'm here to communicate, which I feel very strongly about, that there will be a place where it will be received. That, is something I must believe, because otherwise it would be hard. Because I'm not one of those artists who just creates to create. I like my work to be out there. Not that I'm not.
Right. And you also, yeah, so you also have a lot of connection with the community, and you also mentioned that you do a lot of collaboration. In fact, this piece that you did with for the Minnesota State Fair had to include collaboration.
Yes.
We have a question about collaboration from
Yes.
Teresa, and she
Yes.
says, "I'm really interested in your collaboration with other artists. Is one of those artists Paulina Brenner?"
Yeah.
And what is your most memorable collaboration experience?
Okay. Well, I just mentioned a state fair, which was not the most recent, but very memorable, very wonderful. And then Paulino and I, we created a picture book, which was also very memorable, because Paulino, you're an incredibly creative person. So really fun. And I remember one of your comments, I don't know, maybe it was on Facebook, that you had just stepped out of time for a few hours. Do you remember that? When we collaborated, we were doing a story.
Yes, it was the first online. We collaborated on an online book for
Yeah,
children.
yeah. But we storyboarded and we stepped out of time into the creative space, which is always a delightful experience.
Yes. So, well, I'm glad that was a good, a memorable moment. Do you have any other memorable collaboration experience that you can share?
I have many. When I first came to Minnesota, I started a clown group, actually, of 4 women clowns called the Puff Family, and that was memorable to me. I also toured with the Heart of the Beast Theater down to New Orleans with a big circle of water circus. Well, that was unbelievably memorable. I think it was 25 of us out and about for 6 months doing that. And then, as you know, I do a lot of work as a teaching artist. And I would say that all of those experiences are collaborations. That is my frame of mind when I go into the classroom, that I am collaborating with a teacher who will want something. I mean, they will have a theme, like the most recent one was writing peace poetry. So then I collaborate in that I will design lessons. We will look at which ones we want to focus on. So it's a give and take. And not all artists like to work that way, but I love that. I also did another amazingly memorable collaboration last year, which was a diorama commemorating a theater professor. I think you have a picture of that.
Ah, yes, this one that says "All the World's a Stage."
Yeah, and that was a collaboration. It was done for a professor, a fabulous theater professor from Marshfield, and his 2 daughters collaborated on it with me. So step by step, I could present ideas and get feedback and so forth. And this, of
Now,
course,
this was a commission, correct?
commission.
Right. Now, for those, part of what I would like to bring into the show is to go into the neat and grit of things. You know, we artists sometimes we talk about the beautiful things, but the beautiful things about the arts is like, oh, magic and inspiration, but there are some neat and gritty things that we need to do. What does it mean? I'm going to commission an art from you. I contact you and we talk it over. Of course, I look maybe at your body of art, but then once it's decided, what happens?
Well, in the one specifically that we talked about now, the people who commissioned, the twin sisters, who were fabulous, by the way, looked at my body of work and said these ideas would fit. They wanted an unusual piece. So they will bring me, this is what we saw, this is what we need, and then what do you think? And so, but actually those, when you conceive of the idea, that's the juicy big part for me. The nitty-gritty is sitting there with my sketchbook and then trying to, like in this case, I don't know, it probably doesn't show real well on the image, but this theater behind the curtain in the profile is the literal theater where this person worked. So I had to do like an architectural drawing, which was total math, which is not my strength. So I'm sitting there trying to figure out how to do that diagram of the seating and going, wow, this was my idea. So that's nitty-gritty, Yeah. But because of all my years of experience being a creative person in all these different areas, I know that one way or another I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to do my best. And that's as good as it's going to get, so yeah.
Great. So out of all the things you do, I want to get more into your teaching, but before we get there, I can't pass to mention your books. You talk very dearly about Sophia and the Heart Mender in your others interviews, which it is a book that you have written and illustrated, but you have a breadth of work of other pieces that you collaborated or did part of it. Tell me a bit about the breadth of work and kind of the connection with the publishing world.
So my first two books, Sophia and Afraid of Fearless, which is out of print now, I wrote and illustrated. Then I illustrated other things for my first publisher, Free Spirit Publishing. Spot illustrations, covers, things like that. I've illustrated covers for journals and other things. I've illustrated a book that was self-published. I've illustrated a nonfiction book for Holiday House. So those are a couple of the things.
Yeah, so it's a spectrum of things.
It's a spectrum, and now I won an MRAC grant this year. And the focus of that was to do my very first wordless book, which was very interesting. I'm still in that year. I'm still in that year until June. I'm still working on that project. But that, I would say, combined all my disciplines in a very wonderful way.
I see. How do you approach a wordless book?
Exactly. I thought I was going to sit. I started in August on my balcony and sketched a story, and nothing. Talk about nitty-gritty. No, I had to write it first. So actually the words, the storyline had to come. And here also I had a wonderful writing coach, Molly Beth Griffin, who helped me with excellent feedback. Again, goes back to I like to collaborate. I like to have access to feedback like that. So it's very interesting, and also because it's all visual, then do you follow, what do you do, and so that's in process. I'm not going to share too much about it.
No, let's keep it a secret. We'll learn soon. But I'm sure you're learning. I'm sure you're doing different technologies there. We have questions about different technologies also from Teresa. What other technologies are you using, and do you feel they are a new medium?
Besides Photoshop?
Yes.
I would say in some ways, I don't blog, but I'm quite active on Facebook, and in some ways it is like a mini blog. It is a place where I write almost every day and put some thought to that. So that might not answer it, but in terms of writing, that is a forum for me. Yeah, and I'm also, in terms of Photoshop, I'm learning InDesign. I'm not going to be creating work on there, but I'm interested in what I might be able to do with my art on there in terms of doing the layout for greeting cards and things like that.
Great. So let's get more into the teaching aspect of all the things you do, and give us a little bit of an explanation. What is a teaching artist for you? Because people see a painter and they imagine them with all the canvas and an actor on the stage, but what is a teaching artist?
Well, an artist is a teaching artist. In my particular corner of the world, is an artist that goes into a classroom, K to 12, or any library, any age really, could be working with the elderly, whatever it is, or in hospitals, and share your craft and your love for the craft in a way for people to express themselves through your ideas of how you create. That's what I would say. But the way I look at it for myself is as a creative catalyst. As someone who's dedicated their life to creativity, even through the nitty-gritty, which a lot of it, I would say, 95% is nitty-gritty work, really. But
So,
I can come in and hold the space. And one of the things I just want to mention is that I believe people meet you where you live. So I will come in into a classroom, let's say, just for as sake of an example, 4th grade, we're going to write poetry. And I'm coming in assuming everyone is a creative genius. That's what I'm going to assume. And then kids respond to that. So I think as a creative person, this is, a gift that you can bring.
yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned that because we have a question connected to that. You said everyone is talented in one of your previous interviewed, and now you said a genius, a creative genius. Did you mean that artistically? This question comes from Teresa. What about engineers and scientists?
I don't remember the context of that, but definitely everyone has some sort of talent.
Yes. So I think you mentioned you come into the classroom and you assume everyone is an art genius, or they are all geniuses artistically.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to be my that is what I'm going to, yeah,
Your
come in with.
premise. Okay. So I wanted to ask you about talking about the nitty and gritty. Let's say I'm an artist. For all the young artists out there who want to share their work at school, I'm an artist. I've been developing my craft, whatever there is, and now I want to do a residency. How can I prepare myself or make the arrangement with the school? How does it work?
Well, there are several organizations that might represent you. Compass is a good one. The Loft Literature Center have a roster for writers. Art Start is an amazing organization. Eastside Art Council. The list goes on and on and on. And you can connect and do your work through an organization that represents your particular discipline. That's one way. Or you can try to market yourself to a school. Maybe you have kids, and maybe that is a place to start. That's not what I did, but that is one way. And then it's very formulaic, just meaning that maybe that's the wrong word. It's very structured. That's a better word. That you usually come in for 1 hour times 5 is the traditional model, which means you have to craft 5 different lessons that usually leads to some kind of final goal.
Okay, so let's
Yeah,
talk about some.
yeah.
Let's talk about some of your project. What are usually your themes that you work about in your workshops at schools?
Lately, great focus on poetry, which of course is a big love of mine. Being bilingual, I've had to work for English. I still do, So I love language. So yeah, teaching poetry and giving, holding a space for my students to express themselves. I love that, and I love working with all ages. Um, Elementary school is a good fit for me, but I also I like to work with all ages. So I don't know if that answers. I forgot what you were asking.
Yeah. What were some of the themes that you work? I know
Oh,
that.
in the last one, piece, poetry, leading up to a peace performance in May that this particular school has every year. Nature is often a focus. It's not just the creative expression by itself, but with poetry you tend to go deep. And so we go deep. And I'm not afraid of the deep. So there we go.
There we go. So
Yeah, this,
talking about the deep, and especially your theme, recent theme about peace, and without getting too political, but with all the craziness that is going on in the world, how do you see the work that you're doing with poetry and peace in particular affecting the reality of the children you work with, or does that reality come through, shines through the work they produce?
yes, and I would say that for me, this is my place of making a contribution, for one thing, is to foster free thinking and to foster or hold a space for people to express themselves out of that place of being an authentic human being. So you're not ruled by anything but your own inner voice. And kids naturally do this often, most often, 99.99% of the time. They access this and they surprise me. They inspire me, and hopefully I inspire them. I'm sure, I think I do. I see that in the work they produce. Now, how the particular, in terms of peace, the way they think about it, how that translates into their daily life, there's no way for me to know. But I think it's affirming that we do spend time talking about it.
Hmm. So I'm sharing some of the work. So sometimes they produce a poet like goes more into a poster with some collage, or they make some mini books. So it's not just the production of the written word, but
No,
then
it's not.
how it's manifested artistically as well.
Yeah, because for me, I am, of course, process-oriented, but I am product-oriented as well. To me, if you have a product that you're proud of, it's meaningful to me too. To create a container, a structure for that work, so that we don't have loose pieces of poetry just floating off into nowhere, disappearing in someone's folder. But so in this case, one of the poems will be published in a campus anthology, but all the work will be celebrated by being exhibited in the schools and given to audience members. So those things are important.
Great. Do you have some examples that you would be able to share with us?
I do. I have one from a boy named Max. Do we have time to share this? I'm noticing we're at
We
11.
have all the time in the world.
So this is a poem I thought was appropriate for today. It's called Bring Me to Peace. Bring me to peace. Bring me to a place of kindness. Bring me where I will be happy. Bring me where sadness doesn't exist. Bring me to fun and laughter. Bring me to no war or fighting. Bring me where I can be free. Bring me where darkness isn't a thought. Bring me to no distractions. Bring me to joy. Bring me where the birds fly high. Bring me where needing food isn't real. Bring me to no terror. Bring me to where you want me to be.
Wow. What age is this
10.
student? 10. Wow. Wow.
Now,
That's,
I also have a silly one in case you want that. It's not always serious. Just a bit
yes, still is good.
silly. This is Elizabeth, and we do recipes for peace.
Uh-huh.
Totally love. So this is Peace Punch. 1 cup grated unicorn mane, 1 ton of love, as much girl power as you have. 1 pinch of sugar, directions. When it turns tie-dye, serve.
That is great.
Yeah, I know, it's a hippie poem. So, yeah, it's a rewarding work,
That is
Recipe-
that is wonderful.
Huh?
That is wonderful. Oh dear. That is great work, and I know that sometimes you share some bits and pieces, not only of your experience, but sometimes some excerpts from this on social media. And you talked about social media being a little bit part of a canvas for you, a part of your creative process. Um, how how do you see that in the future being as a way to connect more with your community? Would you like to explore that more?
Not sure yet. I mean, I love the printed work. So
Hmm.
I think for right now, what I'm doing now, I have my website. I'm quite active on Facebook. Maybe I'll create a page, write a yearly newsletter. That is, for now, it's good.
Now for now, it's good.
For now,
Yeah,
it's good. Hmm.
great. We have a couple of reactions from Teresa who's watching. Yay, Teresa! And she said, that is deep, surely to the first poem.
Yeah, I know.
And and then she also says, love the second poem. Yes.
I know.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I want to kind of go full circle a little bit and bring you back to let's go back to a little bit of connection to Minnesota, which
Yes.
is Heart of the Beast. You here I'm sharing a mask that you probably did in one of your mask making workshop with children. And Heart of the Beast, it's the one of the great puppet and mask theaters in the Twin Cities, and you have been associated with them or you have worked with them. Can you talk a little more about the work you've done with them and how that continues in your current work?
Well, mask work was part of the clowning. So I was working with masks for at least 2 years, and then before that, sculpturally, before I met In the Heart of the Beast. So I had that background, so that was a nice match. I found out about In the Heart of the Beast Theater when I was in Bemidji. It was in '82, doing my Commedia dell'arte, which was, of course, masks also. And at the time, they were planning to tour along the Mississippi River to raise awareness about the river. And I auditioned wearing one of the Commedia dell'arte characters. And I was accepted in. And I think we were 25 or we were 27. Sorry if I don't remember that correctly. But that was, I would say, what a great experience that was. And I got to see parts of the U.S. that I might not have otherwise seen. And the group that traveled, I'm still friends with many of them. So just great people on that tour. And I invited, in fact, a Swedish friend to come and join. So she came, and she's still here too. And then a third friend came from my small hometown, and she's still here too. So it pulled in all kinds of interesting people. And after that, I worked on the fabulous May Day Parade for a couple of years. And then I shifted my focus into my writing and my illustration. But I still will do masks. The ones that you're showing are from Park Spanish Immersion, an immersion school, where we do a 3-week project in second grade. Those masks were created by second graders, and we were ending up with a performance in Spanish, which I don't speak.
Yet. We'll work on that. We'll work on that.
We tried, and then we'll see.
We'll see. So great. So that is a strong connection with Minnesota. I want to go back to Sweden a little more to go full circle. But before I do that, I have a last question from Teresa, and she says, teaching with all ages. What about viewers who have been sitting 40 plus years on their talent? Could you offer teaching experiences for them using interactive media?
Interactive.
Interactive media. Well, what we're doing today is very interactive, so Teresa is participating. So maybe more than a question, it's an invitation. Maybe she's inviting you to expand your horizons to teach to the world in many different ways. Who knows?
Well, just to tie into that, I do some of that work. I don't know if this covers that, but I did a mask workshop with teachers at Grace Academy, just 3-hour teacher in service before Christmas break, winter break, I should say, and very rewarding, something that they will then carry on with their preschoolers. But yeah. I do workshops for adults. I've done several through the library system, public libraries, and I plan on doing more of those.
Hmm.
So the way it works is that someone will host a workshop and invite me to come and teach it.
Right. Yes. So I think
So
she was.
if I'm invited to do that, then I will create something that fits what that person is looking for or that organization. So who
Mhm.
knows?
Who knows? I think she was hinting of trying new things, maybe teaching online or doing something online. Who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows what who knows what the future will bring that will be able enable us to even more reach other communities and in education. There's so many possibilities. Like today, we're live and we are interacting.
We're live and we're alive.
Woohoo! We're live and alive.
Yeah.
So, wrapping up, I like to bring you back to Sweden.
Yeah.
And on your interview with Catherine Reed Day, I heard a few stories about your childhood and your working with your neighbors. So, bring us back to your childhood, the good memories. And
And first of all,
what yes, I know that a lot of that have influenced, of course, made you who you are today, but influenced your teaching and your work. um, Tell us a couple of experiences.
so I would say that I'm from a very creative family to begin with. My grandfather and grandmother on my mom's side, her parents had a bakery, and my grandfather used to draw while the bread rose on baking paper. So I watched this. Now, my grandmother couldn't draw, and her and I had a little joke that she would draw and we would laugh. She couldn't. But it was still embracing art. And then my mom is very artistic. My dad could have been a sculptor, very, created beautiful sculptures, although he worked as a carpenter and construction worker. My older sister is creative, and my younger siblings also. So it was there, and then always very allowing of that, of the arts. And I grew up with books of poetry. I remember books of Pablo Neruda in the bookshelf, as far as I can remember, Pablo. And then I think you're referring to the neighbors I had that I would go and see since I was just, could walk. I would walk upstairs, and here was a couple, and they would have been in their 40s at the time, but to me, who knew about age at that, you know. And I would be up there and drawing, and the woman, they'd had one son, but he was grown at the time. She would take my drawings and embroider them into pillows and put them in the sofa. They were portraits of women with earrings, probably images I'd seen in my home. And then the husband loved children, and he was a mason, and him and I told stories together, one sentence at a time. So they really nurtured this love that I had for creativity, or this affinity, I should say, not love, of course love, but affinity that I had. They saw and nurtured it. And I think that some of that really laid the groundwork for my work as a teaching artist.
Great.
To
Yeah.
pass, to pass that on.
So that's a great example that we can be born with many talents, but that nurturing aspect of our environment, our adults, our community is very important as well. And of course, you now are part of that community and nurturing um, our youngsters around here in Minnesota. Have you worked outside of Minnesota? Workshops outside of Minnesota?
Some, but my main focus is here.
Here.
And then going, all over. I've taught all over Minnesota,
All over Minnesota. Great.
as far up as Hallock, which is right, by Winnipeg. So
Perfect. Marie, I want to give you a big thanks for taking time on a Sunday morning. But at least we are cozy in our homes and not outside in the cold. So I didn't have to ask you to even start your car to get
no,
anywhere. But it's been a pleasure learning more about you through your previous interviews and our chat today, and to share it with the world.
thank you, Paulino. And goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Take and give care. Bye-bye.
Bye.